Hello, my name is Halima McCarthy, and I work as the Outreach Manager at Kendraio. All right, I'm joined today by Liam Murphy, founder of CultureBanked, and Daniel Harris, CEO and founder of Kendraio. Can you both introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about it, CultureBanked and Kendraio?
Yeah, for sure. Who wants to go first?
You can, Liam.
I don't have a short. Well, I can have. I either have a very very short answer or a very very long answer. So I'm going to go with the very short one. I came up with the idea of Culture Banked about. Well, it happened in stages actually because it's been different things, but about sort of 7 years ago in the current form. And the simplest explanation of what Culture Banked is that it is at the sort of highest level about sharing intellectual property for particular purposes. And then we get a little more complicated, but we might get into that. I won't say anything about that now. Yeah, that's me. That's what Culture Banked is.
Thank you. Daniel?
Kendraio is a project that's been going for quite a few years, and we initially were investigating interoperability and open protocols and portable data. And at some point, we started building an app, and that's really what our main focus is at the moment. And the app is a no-code, local-first, malleable software app, and the aim is to really empower end users to build their own interfaces and logic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And what are you both collaborating on? What project are you both collaborating on? And what motivated you to start it?
Well, we collaborate on both projects. I think is the very short answer to that one. What motivated? Oh, do you have a good answer for that, Daniel?
Yeah, I do actually. I think that's just an alignment of ideas. I think what you're doing, Liam, with the idea of looking at assets being, for example, an artist with a painting being able to take some of the revenue from that painting, whether it be prints, or hiring it out, and moving that a portion of that into a pot that can then be used by a community or group, I think is really interesting. And also in terms of governance around what happens to that pot. And I know that's only part of what you're doing, but that was the initial thing that got me very interested in Culture Banked. And I know it's also changed and it's grown since then, and looking a lot at taxation, which I don't fully understand, but I think it marries quite well with the kind of values we have within Kendraio in terms of empowering users to decide how they spend their money and where they spend their money, and what decisions they make individually and collectively.
Yeah, that's a good summary, Daniel. The pragmatic answer to that is also that I sought you out. I needed a tech partner to work with who would be able to work with rights in an imaginative way, and in a way that was, it's kind of like this project's a bit of an experiment in altruism. I don't think many people do many things that are entirely altruistic. And I was trying to be consciously aware that I'm doing that as and when I can. Sometimes it's in my spare time. It's not, really about promoting me or and I wanted that in a partner as well. And what I was really impressed about with Kendraio is that how can I put this? You're very committed to working with multiple users, and this notion of bidirectional travel, that there's no assumption that an interface belongs to one and there is another user. It was the fluidity of assets and rights and time and ownership. And I needed to start with that base, really, just to build the idea, because what I'm kind of promoting does not happen.
Yeah.
So and it's experimental in a way.
I just remember that when you probably found Kendraio, we were concentrating a lot more on music rights and stems and rights within rights within rights and samples and moving one sample from one track to another, and then what happens to the rights tree. So yeah, which is all online, but yeah, our focus, it hasn't left that, but we've broadened our focus since then to include other sectors, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. So just a question about CultureBanked artists. How will this project benefit artists or creators? What are the main outcomes you want to achieve from this collaboration?
So what CultureBanked artist is originally we work with an artist who I know called Will Tether, and since then we've worked with other artists. And the simple idea really was to I think, because I don't want to be in a position of having to sort of pontificate about ideas, really. And I like Daniel's approach, where he says to me, look, let's just demonstrate something simple, and it's easier to have an example, an object to speak about. So the original idea was to start very, very rudimentarily, if that's a word, and just build an interface where an artist would have some assets, and then from there we could look at possible choices, ways of empowering artists to do things that they might need to do, things that they haven't thought about doing, but then just to build in functionality. So really, CultureBanked Artist is just a database, and it could be something that anybody with assets. I mean, we could use the word artist, but I know in Scotland, Creative Scotland fund 13 different art forms, including software. So really, it's all, I suppose you could say, knowledge goods. Really, it's almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So coming back to a point Daniel made about taxes, how does tax under license relate to managing digital assets in the future for shared wealth funds?
I mean, one thing we know is that governments don't usually invent very much. It's often said that they don't really do anything but administer. However, obviously, one of the things they do is collect tax on behalf of everybody else. What motivated me with CultureBanked initially actually goes back to a town in East Anglia called Great Yarmouth, in which I was working on a community project to regenerate the town through the arts. And one of the things that very quickly occurred to me is that there wasn't a lot of money in the town. It was a struggling place, and people without money and assets are very difficult to invest in. So it occurred to me that one of the best things that they might be able to do to build something would be to share the assets that they've got, share their creativity and share their work in order to bring some money into the town. And that was really the where this originated. It very quickly became apparent that when you're talking about sharing at any level, the most obvious way that we do that in the world is tax. It just is. So that's kind of how society works. So I just said, look, what would happen if we nominated rights from things that we as people have created, maybe just to pay our tax bill? That's one possibility, and that's kind of straightforward. And then as I investigated that idea, I found odd stories. Like for example, one of my favorite examples of tax under license, one of the first sort of examples of that sort of sharing of IP for a place or a government or an administration was in Lyon in France. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Jacquard loom, but it's actually the Jacquard loom was invented by Jean-Marie Jacquard, and that was about 17, the dates will be wrong, but it was around about 1791. And he actually gave the rights for the loom to the town of Lyon, and they rewarded him with a pension. And I like to sort of think of that as one of the original kind of, that's one of the first CultureBanked sort of transactions, where a highly inventive man said, okay, I'm going to give up all of my rights to my creativity, and really was ridiculously generous, because that loom was still being used in punch cards. Various parts of what he had invented were still operating under license until about 1971 in computing. So there's a huge legacy and a huge amount of wealth through one man's kind of, ingenuity. So the idea of tax under license is really very simply that we use, IP, intellectual property.
Can I just ask something here, though? I think I just got something, but I'm not sure if I got the right thing. Tax under license means there's a license attached to the tax. So it does that mean the tax can't just be spent on anything? Is that correct? Or have I got it?
It could be,
Yeah.
yeah. We're into their sub-levels of complication. I mean,
Right.
Daniel, you and I know that just before this, we were doing some work on updating PPL databases.
Yeah.
I was looking through there to see whether it would just be a box that one would tick. And if you said that there's a little box in the PPL dialog that says splits,
Yeah.
and if there was a box there that said, is this asset culture banked, you would say yes or no, and then on the split you might say 1%.
Yeah.
And essentially what that would mean is that if you are domiciled in the UK, you might say that is 1% of that right for the next, lifetime plus 70 years is going to go into the UK Inland Revenue tax funds. So I call it, so it's tax under license, if that makes sense.
So this makes me curious. How does culture-banked artists align with current trends in the creative or digital asset space?
Well, one of the things that I'm doing at the moment is working with an organisation in Southwest Scotland, and one of the themes that they work on is called creative placemaking. So I don't know if this is a trend within the arts as such, but I think it's a trend that relates to how the arts are used and how the arts relate to places. And we're looking at how we can use our assets to not just bring revenue, but obviously bring people. I mean, when you have a festival in a town, it often brings all kinds of inward investment and money and people into the town. And it's generally documented that the arts can be really good for places in lots of ways. So I don't know if that's a trend, but it's something that has evolved over the last probably 20 or 30 years. And so we're investigating ways of doing that, which are a little bit more inclusive of more people, and perhaps give people an opportunity to kind of demonstrate their worth through what they make. It's a sort of sing for your supper approach, rather than a deficit model of funding where, okay, we're a struggling place, so we need lots of money to help us. Actually, this is more about trying to empower people and say, no, we might be struggling, but we are really, really creative, and we can do all of these things. And that's what we want to shout about.
But also touching on the subject of current trends, as you may know, AI is becoming more involved in creative industries. How do you view the issue of AI rights and ownership, especially considering AI doesn't generate original content?
No, exactly. AI is content. It's owned always, or will be. Uh, Essentially, AI is something that could be culture banked, in the sense that it could create um, huge amounts of wealth. But we obviously have ethical questions, and the ethical questions are that, as you say, AI doesn't create original content. So in fact, even the word content's fairly sort of questionable in the arts. Was Shakespeare creating content? No, what I think what AI means for this project and vice versa is that we are in a desperate need, an urgent need to be able to formalize ways of distinguishing artificial output, from human creativity. Uh, and obviously, we don't compensate algorithms for their work because that's ridiculous. But we must compensate people and appreciate people for their work, and we need to make those distinctions, clear and more effectively, and we have to get good at it very, very quickly because AI is going faster than we can. So,
Thank you. So coming back to Culture Banked Artist, what role does Kendraio play in simplifying the management of digital assets?
We wanted to experiment with so let me step back a bit. So we're building an app, but we want the app to be grounded in reality. So Kendraio has a number of collaborators where we're building demonstrations within each of those collaborations and basically proving that the model that we're using, local first and no code, does actually work in those situations. So as Liam says, we were trying to start with a very simple demo of what Culture Banked might start off looking like, or how it might appear to rights owners or people involved in the kind of timeline of assets.
we were building single instances, really, weren't we? Just an example of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Liam approached one of his artist friends, Will Tether, and we got a repertoire list basically from him of his works, and we played around with that data set and to see that what we could build that might be useful both to Will and to artists in general. And so that's what we looked at.
Interesting. And how does the management of digital assets and transactions work in this project?
Shall I show you?
Yeah. Can you walk us? Can you
It's much better than just okay.
can you please walk us through the technical process you're developing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Okay, here we are. Right. So you should be seeing a screen that says Kendraio app, and I'll just say that it's running within the browser, but it's a progressive web app. It's a PWA. It's built on Angular, and but all the code is actually running locally. That's how progressive web apps work. But it is downloaded from the server. But the idea is eventually this app will run locally without needing the internet. And you can connect to the internet and sync up your data, but it won't need the internet to work. Just like Excel doesn't need the internet in order for you to actually play with your data locally. So let's start off with Will. He gave us this spreadsheet with basically his list of paintings. Are they all paintings? I think they are all paintings. And with different bits of metadata, like the physical attributes, and also who was involved in.
Well, just briefly, Daniel, sorry to interrupt. Will basically gave us the assets. We've created this database with some
Okay,
added. So
you've
think
added
things
some
like
more,
beneficiaries, vendors,
right?
splits, and so on. We've created those categories on top of
On top
Will's
of the
assets.
data.
Yeah,
Okay.
obviously some of those are specific to Will, so that there's a mix of things in there.
Stand corrected. Yes. And what we do is within the app, we go to our Flow Cloud and we search for CultureBanked to see all of the CultureBank flows. Flows are mini apps that we build within Kendraio, and we're going to launch the import, and just so you know what this is doing, this flow is there's a linear running of these action blocks, and the first one goes and looks at the spreadsheet and then makes it ready to be imported. So this is basically the import phase of working with the data in the spreadsheet. So we select everything and we import it, and cross fingers, it will import. And I'm not sure if it did it, but I'm guessing it did. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open up the app in another screen and just check that it did. So if I now go to, again, go to CultureBanked, and now I go to the database view. So let's see if that actually did anything. And it did. I should have showed you the database first, and then that it was blank, but I didn't.
Oh, I see. Oh, so
Yeah,
that's just populated this database.
it has just populated this database, yes.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, so if we look at one of these works, we can see we've got some the metadata that has been transferred from the spreadsheet to. It's actually a local database, so it's running on my machine. No one else can get to this. And we know that this is a kind of a handicap for what we've built so far, but this is like phase one. And hopefully in the future we'll build further developments. Like there'll be a shared database. But at the moment, if I make an edit to this database, like add another owner or that kind of thing, then it won't be reflected anywhere else other than on my local machine. So and I can save that, and then that gets stored. So, but it just shows that we can import into a local environment. I can import a spreadsheet, well, a Google sheet actually, and then work with that. And that's the whole point behind Kendraio app, is that we're flexible on where the data comes from and where it's stored and how we operate on it. And really the interface shouldn't necessarily change that much, whether the data is local or remote. The functionality is basically being able to create stuff, create objects, delete objects, update objects, that kind of thing, list things, select things. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So you've mentioned that the project is split into phases, and this is phase one.
Mm.
So what are the challenges that you faced, and how will you resolve it with the next phase of this project?
Well, I definitely think this was doing what we did here, is definitely enables Liam to demonstrate something to the outside world. And that was really important, to do that really quickly. And I think the next phase will be to, yeah, like I said, create a shared database where this information can actually be useful and we can get more artists in. We can play with different views. So perhaps what does it look like for vendors or for beneficiaries? Personally speaking, I'm very interested in the matrix between galleries and artists and how um, artists and galleries manage works in a collaborative way. And I know that that isn't primarily the focus of CultureBanked in this kind of model, but to have tools that enable that are quite interesting to me. So
Well,
I'm
I
interested in
think I think it's that's as we said, we're building instances. So I think that relationship is one instance of lots and lots. But I mean, what one of the things that I have been and will be trying to push you towards, Daniel, I
that.
don't think we're not at odds on this, is that obviously I want to see what happens with the multiple views that we have of the parties already in here. So if you
Yeah.
talk, if you've got something like an inland revenue next to some artist workshops, next to a church roof fund, you know,
Mm.
and maybe the artists themselves, or maybe some of their beneficiaries would be people they owe overheads bills to, you know. I'm interested in the relationships and agreements and how each of those different parties can interact around what are basically an artist's assets, you know. So I mean, a gallery is a really obvious relationship to explore. It's a good one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a really exciting space, and I think what concerns me is that it's very difficult for all of these parties to work collaboratively
Yeah,
in shared spaces
yeah.
on shared data beyond a shared database. And a shared database gives you some functionality, but it doesn't really help you with workflows and kind of permissions. And I think that's where we're going to with the app, is to really model not only complex data structures, but also model complex workflows that you can't do without getting a developer in and building a whole system. And my fantasy, my desire is that we could do that without having you know, the sort of spreadsheet Excel users could build interfaces and logic without needing to be a developer. I think that would be really exciting, because I think that that would just the pace at which business practices could flourish could be huge. And it's really interesting that we think things are really moving really quickly right now with AI and all of these things, but actually we're not really involved in that. We're not really involved in that process. We're just looking at OpenAI and Tesla and all these kind of, you know, hey, that's nice, but we're not actually building it. And I just wonder if we had more powerful systems at our fingertips, we could just spin up a whole environment where artists and galleries could collaborate, and there could be a whole commerce system around it, not necessarily
Well,
owned by anyone, right?
it's that one of the things I think about is privacy, and people tend to think that they sort of own privacy. They have this idea that it's mine and I've got to protect it, but actually privacy is a public good. You know,
Mm,
you don't have secrets unless everybody else agrees with you.
mm,
It's not really, and if you keep your secrets completely to yourself, then you know it's something different. It's secrecy. It's not privacy.
mm, mm,
Privacy is needed when there are things you do have to share. And one of the things I think we've got into a real problem over, and this is important when we think about managing assets, is that we are always asking other people and other organizations to hold our stuff for us. And we are then justifying who we are. And actually, I think the fundamental basis, and I need this for this project because I've realized, we're dealing with, when you create something, you become unique to that object. You are hugely empowered, and you have more rights than probably you'll ever have in most, scenarios in life, really, because natural property rights are very powerful. If you are relying on multiple vendors and a whole kind of matrix of complexity to kind of be instrumental to do anything with those rights and assets with your stuff, nothing complicated, you're hugely restricted. I'm working with a little organization in Dumfries called The Stove, which is quite a little organization with a big network of artists. And they're very keen to look. They have an interface. They have something that they use for making collective decisions. And what I'd like to do with this eventually is model something where we just basically empower those people to do more, and make better decisions at greater scale, and make more use of what they've got, really.
Well, thank you again for joining me. It was wonderful seeing phase 1 of CultureBanked Artist, and truly looking forward to seeing what the next phases will look like. Do you have any closing remarks that either of you would like to say before we finish this off?
No, I'm really glad we made this video because now I can get him onto phase 2 and start ramping up the pressure. So thank you.
Perfect.
I'm really glad we made this video too. It's been a long time.
It's been a while
in the process. And thank you, Halima, for interviewing us.
Yeah, thank
Very
you.
welcome. It was enjoyable. I enjoyed it.